What if the only creature who noticed your suffering was the one leading you straight into danger? That was the question burning in Evelyn Grant's mind as she watched the injured stray limp past her on the dusty street of Copper Ridge with a strange sense of purpose. The dog should have been searching for scraps or shade like every other starving animal in town, but instead, it walked with steady focus, as if following a path laid deep in its memory. It never looked back. It never hesitated. It turned at each road with certainty even longtime residents didn't have. Evelyn, who was used to being invisible, felt something spark inside her. The dog reminded her of herself. Worn down, pushed aside, moving through a world that barely cared whether she stood or fell. Before she knew it, she found her feet carrying her forward, following the animal at a careful distance. Copper Ridge was hanging by a thread. The drought had stretched into its 4th month, the wells were nearly dry, and families were rationing sips like treasure. Evelyn knew the sharp ache of hunger and thirst better than most. At 28, 5 years a widow, she lived alone at the edge of town. People liked her well enough, but few invited her into their lives. She survived on odd jobs, weeding gardens or patching clothes. But work had dried up, along with the land. That morning she had been standing near Morrison's old general store, staring through the window at shelves full of food she could not afford, when she saw the dog. Brown with white patches, ribs visible, one hind leg dragging. Yet the animal carried itself with strange confidence. Shopkeepers threw rocks to drive it off. Children pointed and laughed. But the dog ignored them all and continued down the street with quiet dignity. Evelyn felt the pull again. A simple connection, but deep. Another living thing no one seemed to see. The dog turned past the church, where the bell hung silent. It turned again near the schoolhouse, where faint laughter carried through the dry air. The sound cut into Evelyn like a blade, reminding her of the family she once dreamed of. A husband still alive, children running through a yard, a home with warmth instead of silence. She pulled her shawl tighter and kept walking. Ahead, the houses thinned. Rolling hills stretched out, dotted with abandoned homesteads long forgotten. Evelyn knew the stories. Families who left in winter storms. Families who vanished without explanation. Cabins rotting under the harsh sun. People in town whispered about these places, saying some were cursed. The dog stopped in front of one of them. The Morrison cabin. Evelyn froze. Everyone knew the story. Joe Morrison and his family had disappeared one winter years ago. One night they were there. The next day they were gone. No signs, no answers. The cabin had sat empty ever since, slowly falling apart. But now, up close, Evelyn noticed signs she had never seen before. The weeds near the porch were bent, the earth freshly disturbed. The door hung slightly open instead of warped shut. The brass knob showed fresh smudges. Someone had touched it recently. The dog scratched the door 3 times, then sat back as if waiting. Evelyn's heart hammered in her chest. The cabin felt heavy with secrets. Yet she stepped forward, because something inside her whispered that turning back would be a mistake. When she pushed the door open, it groaned, but the hinges moved too smoothly for a place untouched in years. As she stepped inside, a mix of dust and wood hit her senses. Sunlight cut through the dirty windows, painting long shadows across the floor. The room should have been empty. It wasn't. A wooden table stood in the center. On it lay hand-drawn maps, soil samples in tiny bottles, and metal pieces from mining equipment. These were not old things. They were fresh. Someone had been working here very recently. Evelyn's breath caught. The dog curled in a warm patch of sunlight, watching her with calm eyes, almost urging her to look closer. She leaned over the table and touched the maps. They showed the land beneath Copper Ridge, marked with precise lines, underground formations, water routes, detailed surveys only an expert could make. A trail drawn in red ink led northwest. At its end was a bold X. Beside it, someone had written, "Primary source, 40 feet down, pure." A tremor ran through her. Pure water, enough to end the drought, enough to save the town. Beside the maps lay a letter. Evelyn picked it up with shaking hands. It was addressed to a buyer, Dated 3 days ago. Signed by Silas Crow, the wealthy merchant who had been buying out families across Copper Ridge. Crow claimed he wanted to help struggling people start over, but now his true plan was clear. He had known about the water. He had paid someone to find it. He planned to let the drought grow worse so desperate families would sell their land for next to nothing. And once he owned the valley, he would discover the water and sell it back to the town. Evelyn staggered back from the table, her stomach sinking with dread. The dog's ears rose suddenly. It gave a low growl, staring at the window. Evelyn listened. Footsteps, voices, coming closer. Her heart dropped as she heard a voice she recognized, Silas Crow. Another voice joined him, one that made her skin crawl. Marshal Dixon, the man sworn to keep the peace. They were both in it together. Evelyn's breath shook as she scanned for somewhere to hide. The cabin was small and bare. The windows were too grimy to escape through. Panic surged through her. The dog trotted to a dark corner where a loose floorboard sat crooked. Evelyn rushed to it, prying it up with trembling hands. Beneath was a narrow crawl space. She slid inside just as the cabin door swung open. She pulled the floorboard over her head, darkness swallowing her. Dust filled her nose. She pressed a hand over her mouth, steadying her breath. The men entered. Crow's boots crossed the floor above her. Maps are here. Samples, too. Morrison did good work. Evelyn stiffened. Morrison. Joe Morrison had not vanished. He had been working for Crow. Then Dixon spoke. And the widow. Evelyn Grant. She was following that mutt today. Evelyn froze. The dog pressed against her. Dixon continued. She doesn't have much to lose. Lonely people see too much. Crow's voice hardened. If she saw anything, she won't live long enough to speak of it. A gun clicked. Crow began ripping up floorboards. His steps drew closer. Evelyn's pulse hammered. The dog stiffened. Before she could stop it, the dog let out a sharp cry, but not from their hiding place. It echoed from across the cabin. Crow whipped around. There. He stormed toward the sound. But before he reached it, another voice shouted from outside. Silas, riders coming up the trail. Looks like half the council. And they are armed. Crow cursed. Grab everything. We're leaving. Boots scrambled. The back door slammed. Silence swallowed the cabin. Evelyn stayed frozen until she heard familiar townsfolk approaching. Only then did she push up the floorboard and climb out, gasping for air. But the trouble she had uncovered was far from over. This was only the beginning. The room felt smaller as Evelyn stood there, dust clinging to her clothes, the stolen truth pressed against her chest. The dog stayed close to her leg, its warm body steady against her shaking knees. Sunlight caught the edges of the paper in her hand. Joe Morrison had tried to save Copper Ridge before Silas Crow silenced him. That thought burned deep. A dozen people crowded into the doorway. Clara Whitmore stepped forward, firm and sure, her eyes sharp as polished steel. Others followed, ranch hands and council members, their faces tight with confusion and anger. Clara's voice held command. Evelyn Grant, what brought you here? Evelyn hesitated. Fear pressed down on her like a heavy stone. She had lived so long unseen that speaking felt like stepping off a cliff. But then the dog nudged her gently. She lifted the paper with trembling fingers. I found this. And I saw Crow and Dixon. They were here. Clara took the page and read. The others crowded close. As they realized what it meant, outrage rippled through the cabin. Some cursed under their breath. Others clenched their fists hard enough to whiten their knuckles. Clara's jaw tightened. This says there's water enough for 3 towns. And Crow has known all along. The room filled with angry mutters. People were tired of thirst, tired of burying livestock, tired of praying for rain that never came. And now they knew the truth. Silas Crow had planned to starve them out. One of the ranch hands spat on the floor. He bought up my daddy's land for pennies last week, said the drought was only getting worse. He lied to all of us. Clara stepped toward Evelyn, looking at her with new respect. We need your help. Tell us everything." Evelyn told them about the floorboard, the voices, the maps, the gun. She told them Crow's plan and Dixon's betrayal. Each word brought more fury to the room, like sparks falling on dry grass. By the time they rode back to town, the story had outrun them. Word spread fast. People gathered in the square, faces sunburnt and drawn with months of suffering. Clara climbed the steps of the old general store, holding the survey high. "People of Copper Ridge, listen close." Joe Morrison found water, and he tried to warn us before he disappeared. Gasps filled the air. Parents held their children tighter. Silas Crow hid the truth while buying our land for next to nothing. Marshall Dixon helped him. A shout rose from the crowd. Then another. Anger surged like a wave. Evelyn stood near the front, both shaken and steady. For the first time in years, people looked at her, really looked, not with pity, not with judgment, but with trust. Just then, Marshall Dixon pushed through the crowd. His badge glinted in the sun. He lifted his hands. "Don't listen to her. She's confused." "You're going to take the word of a lonely widow over your own Marshall?" His voice wavered. Clara stepped forward, fire in her eyes. "This isn't her word. It's Morrison's." She thrust the paper toward him. Dixon paled. "That doesn't prove anything." But the crowd heard the tremble in his voice. Someone yelled for him to answer. Another shouted for truth. Dixon looked around, trapped by the fury he helped create. Finally, he cracked. His knees hit the dust. All right. Crow planned it. He wanted the whole valley. I only followed because I was afraid to lose what little I had." 2 ranch hands grabbed him by the arms, ripping the badge from his chest. Clara raised her voice again. Crow fled. "If he reaches the capital, he'll twist this into his own story. We can't let him get there first." Evelyn felt a surge of determination. Crow had tried to kill her. He had stolen the future of the whole town. He would not get away. "I'll ride with you," she said. Clara nodded. "We leave within the hour." They gathered horses and supplies. Evelyn climbed onto a borrowed mare. The dog limped alongside, refusing to be left behind. A group of 6 set out, following Crow's trail into the dry hills west of town. Tracks showed they gained on him. He rode heavy with stolen maps and samples. Late afternoon sun turned the ground to shimmering gold as they entered a narrow pass with high stone walls. There he was. Crow stood by a trickle of water, filling a canteen. His horse grazed nearby. He spun when he heard them, the smooth mask dropping for a flicker of panic. Clara aimed her rifle. "Silas Crow, you're done." Crow tried to smile. "Copper Ridge's finest. Out here chasing a man trying to help you? You should thank me for finding the water." Evelyn stepped forward. "You were going to sell it back to us at a price you chose. You let families go thirsty to feed your own pockets." Crow's eyes narrowed. "I should have silenced you when I had the chance." His hand darted for his revolver. Clara shot first. Crow staggered, collapsing against the rocks. The pistol fell from his fingers. His chest darkened with spreading blood. He gasped once but said nothing more. The fight was over. They buried him beneath a cairn of stones. No prayers, no words. Just a quiet acceptance that justice had been done, even if the law had not carried it out. They returned to Copper Ridge with Morrison's maps, the truth, and the salvation of the town. The next morning, the digging began. Day and night, people worked. Shovels cut into dry earth. Sweat and hope filled the air. Finally, a young man at the bottom of the pit shouted, "It's damp!" Moments later, water burst from the ground. Cool! Clear. Pure. Cheers shook the valley. Children ran through puddles. Women cried into their hands. Men shouted thanks to the sky. The drought had ended. Evelyn stood at the edge of the new well with the dog at her feet, her heart swelling as she watched joy ripple through the town. She had not expected her lonely life to change. She had not expected to matter. But she did. She mattered more than she ever believed. And Copper Ridge, would never forget the woman who followed a stray dog into a forgotten cabin. The sun rose over Copper Ridge with a warmth the town had not felt in months. Children splashed at the new well, their laughter rising like music. Buckets clanged, horses drank deeply, and families gathered with relief so strong it felt like a new beginning. But for Evelyn Grant, this was only the start of a life she had never imagined for herself. Since helping expose Silas Crow, people no longer walked past her without seeing her. Neighbors brought pies and fresh bread to her small cabin. Families invited her to supper. Women stopped her in the street to thank her. Men tipped their hats with respect instead of polite distance. But the biggest change of all was the dog. No one knew its real name, so children started calling it Scout. Scout followed Evelyn everywhere. When she swept her porch, he rested by her feet. When she went to the well, he limped beside her, with his tail wagging proudly. When she closed her door at night, he curled on the mat like a loyal guard. Evelyn often looked down at him and whispered, "You saved more than you know." One afternoon, Clara Whitmore came to Evelyn's home, her boots dusty and her expression gentle. "You've become important to this town, Evelyn. We want you to take charge of Morrison's maps. The council trusts you to keep them safe." Evelyn felt her breath catch. She had never been trusted with anything beyond small chores. Now, she held the future of Copper Ridge in her hands. "I'll do my best," she said. "You already have," Clara replied. From that day on, Evelyn worked inside a small room behind the general store where the maps were stored. She organized the papers, copied the surveys, and helped plan new wells for the expanding town. She spent her days with purpose and her nights with gratitude. But something still weighed on her heart. Joe Morrison. His name lingered in her thoughts like a whisper. She often wondered what had happened to him in those final days, what he feared, what he hoped. The truth she uncovered had given his work meaning, but his story still felt unfinished. Late one evening, after finishing her duties, Evelyn locked the map room and stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky glowing with the last light of sunset. Scout walked proudly beside her, sniffing the ground as if searching for something. She wandered past the well, past the church, and up the hill overlooking the valley. The fields below were green again. Crops were planted. Cattle grazed. Smoke rose from chimneys where families cooked supper. She stood there, feeling the warmth in her chest, when she heard boots behind her. A man's voice said softly, "I hoped I'd find you here." Evelyn turned. It was Samuel Hart, one of the ranchers who had helped dig the first well. He was around her age, quiet but kind, with steady eyes that made her chest tighten just a little. "Oh," she said, startled. "Is something wrong?" He shook his head. "Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to thank you. What you did took courage most folks don't have." Evelyn looked down, unsure how to respond. She had never been praised much in her life. "I only followed a dog," she said. Samuel smiled gently. "Takes strength to follow a path alone." They stood side by side in easy silence as the sun dipped lower. Scout lay at their feet, tail thumping. After a moment, Samuel cleared his throat. "I know you've been alone a long time, and I don't want to overstep, but if you ever want company, maybe supper or a walk, I'd be honored." Evelyn's breath trembled. She had lived so long in loneliness that she'd forgotten what it felt like for someone to want her company. "I think I'd like that," she said softly. Samuel nodded, relief in his smile. "Good." Then it settled. As he walked her back toward town, Scout trotted ahead, checking the road as if he somehow understood everything happening between them. Weeks passed, and life in Copper Ridge grew brighter every day. Evelyn and Samuel spent more time together, sharing meals, talking after work, walking the hills with Scout bounding beside them. Evelyn found herself smiling more, laughing more, trusting more. One evening, as the town gathered for a small celebration near the new well, Clara Whitmore pulled Evelyn aside. "You look happier," Clara said, her voice warm. Evelyn touched the stray curls at her neck, embarrassed. I didn't think I'd feel this way again. Not after losing my husband, Clara nodded. Sometimes life gives us a second chance when we least expect it. Music drifted through the air. Children danced. Lanterns glowed. Samuel crossed the square and offered Evelyn his hand. Care to join me? Her heart fluttered, but she nodded. They stepped onto the packed dirt and moved slowly to the rhythm of the fiddler's bow. Samuel's hand was warm around hers. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt seen, valued, cherished. Scout barked happily from the sidelines, chasing the children who clapped and laughed. As the dance ended, Samuel leaned close. "Evelyn, I want you to know something. You didn't just save the town, you saved me too." She looked up, surprised. "How?" he smiled. "By showing everyone what courage looks like. And by reminding me that hope isn't lost, even in the hardest seasons." Evelyn's eyes softened. She felt the weight of her old loneliness lift, replaced by something new and steady. Standing there beneath the lantern glow, Samuel gently took her hand. And just like that, the widow who once lived in shadows found her place at the heart of Copper Ridge. Not because she was loud, not because she was strong in ways people expected, but because she followed a dog into an abandoned cabin and chose to speak truth when fear told her to run. In doing so, she found water for a thirsty town. And she found love for a thirsty heart. Scout barked once, proudly, as if claiming credit for everything that had happened. Evelyn laughed, leaning into Samuel, feeling the warmth of a future she never thought she'd have. Copper Ridge was alive again, and so was she.